Hey everyone, it's Darren. Welcome. Today we're going to talk about rounding in Excel. And there's a bunch of different ways to round things in Excel. Some of them are actually technically not rounding. And we're going to start off with a couple of those because they're actually a little bit faster, a little bit easier to use. You'll probably use them more often, in fact. The first one we're going to talk about is the int function. If you've seen the video on integer division, we've already talked about int sum. If you haven't seen it, you can check the link down in the description. So let's just jump right into a couple of examples here. Uh, we have int of a2, a2 being 4.4. Int of 4.4 is 4. No surprise there. Okay, what about trunc? Stands for truncate of a2, and that also gives us 4. Okay, so far they look like they're identical functions. Well, let's copy these down. And if we look at int of -4, it's still -4, and trunc of -4 is still -4. So far they're still identical. Here's where the things change. If we look at int of -4.4, you see that what int is actually doing is it lowers it to the next lower number. So a positive number, it'll just chop off the decimal. A negative number, it'll actually take it to the next lower number. Whereas truncate just takes the decimal part and just throws it away and just leaves you with the whole number part. Which of those you want to use depends on what you're doing with it. There are some good reasons for doing both. Uh, let me show you why we actually have the distinction. If we look down here and we see the int function, where it crosses 0, you still wind up with an even distribution of numbers. Whereas the trunc function doubles up on the 0. And that can matter. Again, it depends on what you're doing, whether you care. Depends on what you're doing, which one you actually want to have. So those are the really basic, those are the most basic functions of that are kind of like rounding. Like I said, these aren't technically rounding functions, but you'll use them a lot. For integer division, you'll pretty much always use the int function, not the trunc function. Okay, now let's jump into the actual rounding functions. So we have um, round. That's the first one. It's the most commonly used. Round of a2. And too few arguments. Why is that? Round, all of the round functions actually, although you would think it would default to just round to a whole number, it doesn't. So you actually have to do round, comma, 0 at the end if you want it to go to a whole number. And you can copy that down. And you see round 4.4 goes to 4, -4 goes to -4, -4.4 goes to 4. 3 1/3 goes to 3, 3 2/3 goes to 4. Okay. What about, what if we make this 4.6? 4.6 rounds to -5, which is right. That's where you'd expect it to go. Unlike integer where it actually just drops it lower, and trunc that just chops the stuff off, round actually decides which direction it needs to go based on what you have. You'll also see that we have the numbers here. That second parameter, I put in 0. And what if we made that a 1? That would be 3.3 instead of 3. If we made this one a 2 down here, for example, and it's 3.67. So you can decide how many digits out you want, and that applies to all the round functions. So what about round up? Well, round up is kind of the anti-int function, I guess. I'll show you here. Round up a2. Sorry, round up a2 comma 0. And you see round up always takes it up to the next higher one. The weird thing is that round up with negative numbers here uh, takes it away from 0. So it's not the higher number, it's the away from zero number, if that makes sense. Um, Round down is sort of just the opposite. It rounds towards zero. So positive numbers round down, negative numbers actually technically round up. If you think of it as round up being away from zero, round down being towards zero, that makes a little more sense. And I can show you how these ones are here. So it's A2, 0, and we'll copy that one. So here you had negative 4.6, round down, rounding it towards zero, went to negative 4. Uh, so then you have M round. M round is sort of a different one. M round has limited usability, limited usefulness, but it does have some usefulness. M round rounds to the nearest number that is divisible by a number that you give. So if we look at M round here, and let's do equals M round A2, and you see instead of saying number of digits, it asks you for a multiple. So I'm going to do a multiple of 3 on this one. So M round A2 3 gives me 3. And the reason is that the rounding to the nearest number divisible by 3 takes me to 3. Uh, and if this instead of 4.4 were, 75, okay, that's not a great example. Well, we'll do 75, but then we'll do M round of 7, for example. And M round, the nearest number divisible by 7 to 75 is 77. So Emerald, you're not going to use a whole lot. You might use it, for example, if you're looking for how many hours expressed in days. So you could do, if I know this is going to take me 75 hours, well, how many days of work is that? Well, actually, if it's hours of work, we're going to do an 8-hour workday. 72 hours would be an even number of work days. You kind of get the same thing through using int and mod, and you can use either one, whichever one makes sense to you. So mround is pretty limited usability, but some people will find it very useful. Okay, there's one more trick I want to show you with rounding functions. A lot of people don't know about this one, but it can actually be really useful. Let's put in something like that. Okay, so now if we do round A13 1, that's going to round it to 1212.1. If we do round A13 comma 0, that rounds to 1212. But this is the part most people don't know works. What if you use a negative number? A13 comma negative 1. And it rounds to the nearest 10. So it moves another digit over to the left. So we can actually keep going with that. We can do equals round A13 comma negative 2. And it rounds to 1200. So positive numbers will round into the decimals and negative numbers round into the whole numbers. Won't always use it, but it's really useful to have it there if you need it. Anyway, that is all I have for you for the rounding functions, including the two that aren't technically actually rounding functions. Uh, just have to keep track, how you handle negative numbers. It varies a little bit, and as long as you know what it's doing, shouldn't cause you any problems. If you have any questions, please drop them down in the comments. If you learned anything from the video, be sure to hit like and also subscribe and hit notify so you can see when I release new videos. I also have a Patreon page at patreon.com/data analysis excellence. If you'd help out the page that way, that would be great. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for stopping by.